Cool. All right. Well, welcome back. This is the second of two discussions between me and Brandon Brandmars. Um, yeah, I'm Ethan. Ethan Benson is my YouTube. Um, yeah, a couple discussion points. How you feeling?
Feeling good, feeling good. We had a good talk. These are the kinds of discussions that, you know, that I enjoy. We some
Mm.
people talk about the weather and sports and politics, and we talk about things that help us move our lives forward. So I'm all about it.
We're philosophers. We are.
Yeah.
um. Yeah. No. Definitely agree. It's funny. I was having that conversation with a mate a little while ago that yeah, it's rare, but it's always nice when you have discussions that are like about things versus I don't know, like yeah, conversations about politics or the weather or whatever are about things, but they're not really anything, like there's no distinctions being made, there's no learnings from it. It's just to pass the time, really. It's not really
Yeah.
productive or anything. Yeah,
Hmm.
discussions like this are nice. Cool. Well, I guess we'll get started with the bullet points that we have here. The first one that to get into was what do you think is the most important self improvement habit? Like, if you had only one thing that you were doing, what would you be doing? And I want to hear as well from everyone watching, like in the comments, what they think as well
Yeah,
on
this
all
was
of these
this was
topics,
a
really.
yeah, this was a tough one because I think everything kind of comes together for
Mm,
self-improvement because self-improvement is a combination of things, but I think the one thing that kind of enables everything else is um having a level having a high level of self-awareness. So if we're strictly referring to an activity, I would say meditation or mindfulness
mm,
because Um, I think everything starts from awareness, right? Like we can literally just sit here and do nothing, but in order to get us to move, we have to become aware that there's something that we need to do, whether it's a problem or an activity that we need to take care of, like, a survival instinct, or maybe it's something that's happening to us in our immediate environment. We need to act. We need to become aware of the act. Um, you know, and if we're going to get more concrete, we can go back to the example of fitness. So, we become aware that we need to maintain our health and get in better shape and do it for a reason that, there might be a problem. Maybe we're overweight. Maybe we want to look better because we want to attract someone of the opposite or same sex, whatever you're into. That's those are all things that come from awareness, right? And becoming
mm.
aware of how to do those things is another thing, right? So I've recently kind of came to like a framework that I've looked at for self-improvement that I think applies to almost anything that you want to, pursue, whether it's a skill, an activity, a goal. And so I'm gonna try not to butcher it off the top of my head, but like we talked about, the first thing is awareness, right? The second thing is going to be, the mindset that you have about the topic. The next thing is going to be the activity or habit that you build around that that you're trying to accomplish, right? Whether it's getting into fitness, whether it's having better thoughts about something, whether it's
Mm.
making more money, that's definitely part of self-improvement. Um, and then after that, it's going to be practice, right? Like you want to get better at it. You want to get better at the thing. So you want to practice it deliberately for a long time to where it becomes second nature and that, you don't suck anymore. You're actively getting better at it. And then after
Mm.
that, it's going to be, um, you know, kind of reiterating. So you want to do it over again to where it's to a point that you want it, you want to gain mastery of it, or you're going to maintain it because it works for you. And then it's a constant cycle for everything that you pursue. And this kind of came to me as I was writing content for Twitter and writing my newsletter is that um, everything starts with awareness. So yeah, what about you, man? How do you view the number one thing?
See, I came at it from a very similar tact. I was thinking, yeah, definitely awareness is the most important thing. For me, though, it's more the journaling, I think, that enables that for me. Like, certainly, I agree meditation in terms of like physical awareness and that sort of a thing. It definitely is massive. It's, I tell people to do it every single video of mine pretty much. But I think for me, journaling, just being able to put that into writing, it's like we were talking about in the first discussion. To me, when you write something down, that's when it sort of becomes real, and that's when you can start to like rationalize it and make sense of it and sort of order it and structure it and that sort of a thing. Because yeah, it really, because I think that's one of the big benefits of journaling is that not only do you write down your thoughts, but then you can read over them and sort of go, well, like, why is that? Why do I feel that way? Why do I think that? What's leading to that? And then you can write some more about that, and then based on that you can even write a step further, like, well, what's led to me thinking that about that, like you can sort of go down an endless rabbit hole. And of course, like, I've definitely known myself in the past that can lead to like a degree of overthinking, almost like you can sort of go too far with it. But the good thing about overthinking is that by going that hard at a particular issue, you're going to strike across some gold somewhere along the line, like you're bound to come up with the solution to your question at some point, like whatever that question is for yourself. You're bound to come up with it at some point. It's just being able to then review what you've come up with and figure out if you've done that yet or not. Because I guess where overthinking becomes a problem is where you've got the answer, but you still keep searching anyway. Um, I know that's certainly something that I've struggled with in the past, but yeah, I think now just by going through that process over and over again, I've gotten a lot better now at just sort of being able to recognize, like, well, even if that isn't necessarily the correct answer, that'll do for now. That's like workable to improve uh, myself at least one step, and then maybe once I've reached the next stage, then I'll come up with the more precise interpretation of things. But it's just about finding something workable to get from the stage I'm at to the next stage.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like you were saying about overthinking, um, we get stuck in the analysis paralysis, right?
Mm,
Or whatever it's called. But yeah, I totally get why journaling would be something that would be top of mind because, even if we relate it back to my example of awareness, maybe you're not aware of where you need to go at the moment until you journal. And once
yeah.
you journal, you can have clarity by being able to discern which of those activities is most important as you see it.
Mm,
But I would say at the same time, you could become aware of what you need to journal in that moment. So it works both ways, I believe. And
yeah.
I think it all depends on how you come at it and what works best for the individual, right? Because
100%.
we all operate a little bit differently. Um, and what works for you might not work for me, but there might be some tidbits that I can share that that you could benefit from and vice versa. So um, for
Definitely.
sure, self-improvement is an all-encompassing thing, but there are some things that kind of shine in certain situations. So I think we can use that to our advantage and really plug in the right qualities we need at the right times.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think you touched upon something that I've really tried to emphasize in my content. Probably not as much now as I used to, but I should make a point to reemphasize it in future. And that is that point of like it's a little different for each individual person. Like it's very easy to come out and give very broad like, you should do this specific thing, with our with our content. But at the end of the day, it is very much it depends is really the right answer most of the time. Like
Yeah,
it depends on the individual, where you're at, what you're doing, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past, what your mindset is, what your values are, what you see as being important, what's not important. Like it's very individual, and
yeah,
that's why I've always been a big proponent of like I guess not necessarily like that people should be paying for coaches in particular, although that is what I'm selling them. That's what I'm selling. But like it is very helpful to have coaches in your life that can help you develop what that individual solution is for you.
yeah. Like I think that that makes complete sense. Like a coach acts as a guide to kind of point you at the things that you may already know, but you're not quite seeing
Mm,
yourself. And like I said, that's also awareness. Like awareness doesn't have to just come from, you figuring out yourself. It definitely comes through experiences and taking action. And I think
yeah.
part of the awareness comes from, going through something that you haven't before that kind of brings about a perspective that you weren't familiar with at the time or in that moment. So yeah,
Mm,
it's interesting how, everyone is different in a way that, some people need more of the guidance, other people kind of just figure it out, and then some people just, you know, doesn't matter how many ways you slice it, they don't get it. And then one day they just get it,
mm,
there's so many ways to skin the cat, right? Or if you will. And
yeah, yeah.
for me, I think that along my journey, I needed to um to start small, right? To not just jump in and come in guns blazing and just, try to do every little thing that I can to accomplish that goal, but instead develop the habit to get closer to it that I wasn't doing before. And now that I've developed the habit, I can add on to the add on to the activity that I'm doing that'll kind of push me forward. For example, is like with fitness, like, you're not going to go to the gym as a beginner and do a 6-day program
Mm.
that's strength training for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like for the most part,
If you
nobody,
did, you'd be fucking sore.
yeah, for the most part, nobody can sustainably do that. And unless you're just some freak of nature, but
Yeah,
but second of all, you want to start with the habit. Like I was saying, you want to build the habit of being able to go to the gym, show up for like what, 10 minutes, give yourself a goal of 10 minutes and you might end up staying for 20, 30, and you've won, right? The
yeah,
point is to show up. And then once you're able to show up without having to force yourself, then you can add more nuance. You can add more flair to it. You can add features to whatever you're doing. More workout, more exercises, sets, and so on. But like the point is that everyone's different. You got to find what works for you and kind of stick to that and use that whenever you're pursuing a new endeavor.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, I definitely, yeah, that point of setting like a low threshold for success is something that, yeah, I think is really important. It's something that I've been trying to focus on communicating in my past couple videos in particular. Yeah, like if you can just make the threshold for success like one step, like, I guess initially the success is just showing up, but then yeah, you just make it like a step above just showing up so that you get that initial momentum to start, and then once you've got that, then it's easier to keep going. It's just that initial getting started. So if you make getting started easy and like make getting started the success in itself, well then you're almost bound to just keep going just because you're there, like
Yeah.
it's mostly to do with the you're just going to do what's easiest to do, so if you make it really easy to follow through with the habits that you're trying to set out, then that's like half the battle.
Right. And then at the same time, like it's very sustainable, right? Like it's
Mm,
like you're not gonna, in the beginning, usually you're really excited to get started. But what happens like 2 weeks, a month later, you don't have that same level of motivation. And that I think that's normal because I've experienced that with anything that I've pursued. um, you know, After some time, you don't have that same level of excitement, but you want to still get the benefits of the activity. So you set a low threshold, something that you can fall back on, even when you don't feel like doing it. You're still able to do it without catastrophizing about how long it's going to take to get it done or how much effort you have to put in to get the benefits out of it. Um, but the benefit is in the showing up. And I
mm,
think, if you can pursue that for a long time and and get it to a level where you can maintain it, then you've surpassed 99% of people that always quit.
yeah.
And that's an accomplishment. Like it's simple, but in practice it's a little harder to do unless you have that awareness.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, as you were saying there, yeah, like it all comes back to that awareness of just like knowing that by showing up, you've beaten 99% of people. Like every single time you show up, someone else hasn't, you've gained a spot in this race, like just
Yeah,
by showing up and doing the bare minimum, you're doing more than most people, because most people are just sedated on their phones or whatever, or
exactly.
in
Yeah.
front of the TV or computer. We should probably move on to the next dot point here, I reckon. And yeah, it's sort of following on from that first one. Uh, what do you think the most overrated self improvement habit is? Like, what do you think a lot of people recommend that isn't really necessary for you? Like, yeah,
And that's a good one. Yeah, I don't think during the time I was able to come up with anything. Um, do you want to take this one first, and then I can see if I can come up with something?
sure. I think something that gets hyped up a lot that isn't necessarily, it's important, right? But it's not the point of self improvement for
Mm,
me, is making money. I think quite a lot recently. I think because of particularly the popularity of Andrew Tate, there's been a big focus on like making money, online business, entrepreneurship, that sort of a thing. While that is important, of course, because you need money to live, I think the overall focus of self improvement shouldn't be strictly that. And what I see a lot of younger guys, particularly like late teens or whatever, who are just getting into self improvement, are doing, is that they're focusing exclusively on that from the get go. Whereas to me, I feel like the more important thing is developing character, developing the
yes.
the tools that, like, making yourself someone valuable before you start trying to get people to give you money. Like you need to become
Yeah.
someone who's worth investing in before people invest in you,
You have to have
Whereas
the
a lot of
value to
people seem
offer.
to be doing it backwards. They're
Mhm.
trying to get that money and then become valuable, but it's like, no, you need to provide the value first. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's something that's been on
Yeah,
my mind
and
lately.
I think it's more of a stigma with young people that don't have the life experience to understand that you have to go through some stuff. You have to go through shit in order to become something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're 18 years old, 19 years old, you haven't done much. You know what I mean? Like, just to be honest, I mean, unless, your life's been super crazy, but um, you have to get life experience under your belt. You have to provide perspective because anybody can, and this is something I've also heard on Twitter, is that anybody can talk about values and platitudes and things, the very mundane things that people can do to get better. But if you don't add any type of experience or perspective or personality to that advice, you just sound like everyone else on the internet. And you don't
Yeah.
provide anything different or unique that gives people what they want to hear. And people want to hear stories. We talked about in the previous talk that people are emotional. People want to be um, people are sold on emotion, but people are also just captivated through emotion. Where we all at movies and music, right? That's something that we gravitate to at a visceral level. So going back to the money thing, yeah, I completely agree with that. I think especially the younger people gravitate towards money, but they have nothing to exchange. And money is just, it's a tool to exchange value with, right? And if you
Yeah.
don't have the value, you're not going to complete that exchange, unless you're doing some questionable things. But
Mm.
um, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Money's just a representation of the value of your time. Like, if your time isn't worth anything because you don't have any value, then it's pointless trying to earn money because you don't have the value to really make a significant the significant sums of money that they want to make, I guess.
yeah,
Because they're all after make 10 grand a month in a month from now, like
yeah,
they want that quick fix. Um, yeah,
yeah. They want they want that 4 hour work week when they haven't put in the time or the reps to get to that point. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
you need that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, no problem. You need kind of the experience, right? Like we were saying, you need the experience and you need to know what it's like to um I think you need to go through the harder times in order to get to a better life because you really don't know what you're missing out on, I think. Like I
Mm,
think if like for example, like someone who's born into money, they don't understand what it's like to struggle, so they've never worked for that that fortune that they have. So it's like they don't know how to appreciate the bad. I think we learn from the dualities in life, right? We we can't really appreciate the good times unless we've been through the bad times. If everything's been good all of our lives, then that's all we know. Like we don't know what bad is unless something is slightly worse than what we're feeling now.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I guess going off of that, um, to answer the question, I think overrated skill. And I do think this is important, but I think it's highly overrated is reading books. I think reading
ooh,
books is good, right? Like you get a lot of perspective from it. There's, decades of knowledge in there from the authors that they compiled together. And I think that's great, right? Like you should definitely add reading to your daily routine. But I think it's mostly a supplement. It's a supplement to the learning you do. I think the bulk of your self-improvement is going to come from, like we said, experience. Um, because you can read books to your blue in the face, and I've heard of, larger creators and influencers talk about how they read books or how they used to read books before they became big like they were, and it didn't do anything. Like they remember about 5% of it. Um,
yeah.
So it's like books should help to complement the experience that you're having, but they shouldn't be the one thing that you focus on that is going to drastically improve your life. You have to be directly implementing the practices that you learn from the books. And on top of that, not to knock the slower process of sitting and reading, but if you're a visual person, if you're a kinesthetic person, you're not going to get as much out of a book as you would with hands-on experience or watching a video. I think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards short form video and even, long form YouTube videos like these, because they kind of give us nuance, right? Like you see the expression on our faces, you see the way
Mm,
we're interacting, the tone of our voice. I think learning has a lot to do with all your senses, not just one. Um, and obviously, you know, you can put so much in a book and or a video, but you don't get the same effect. So, I guess to sum it up, I think books are a supplement, just like you should take supplements when you're working out or trying to get healthy. But you can't just take supplements and expect to live a long, healthy life. You need the actual macronutrients. You need the meat, which is experience and getting getting more perspective that way. So
mm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, yeah, I think for me, the big rule has always been three, like essentially a 3-to-1 ratio action to reading. Like you read for an hour, then you've got to take 3 hours of action, like based on what you've read, and that served me quite well. I've found, because yeah, I personally, for me, like yeah, of course, yeah, watch our videos. But for me, I always find the biggest distinctions are made in books. Yeah, again, it's just for me, the biggest distinctions are made there just because it's something that is more laid out in like a methodical, thought out way, whereas like a discussion or an open form conversation or something like that. Certainly, I've learned a lot from those sorts of things and from videos and stuff. But when it's nicely laid out in a book and it's like the writing on the page, something about that just helps my mind click a lot more than a video. Because for me, it's like, how many YouTube videos do I remember watching? And to be honest, it's like maybe 1 in 100 I remember. Whereas books, sure, maybe I don't remember all of them necessarily, but I definitely remember a lot more just because you spend more time interacting with it. You're spending maybe 5 hours just on this one particular book, this one particular topic, and because of that, you're just really engaged with that particular topic. But yeah, I definitely agree though. It's like a supplement's a good analogy because yeah, you need to still be doing the work and putting in the reps to make it worth anything. Like knowledge without action is pointless. But I think it's to me it's more like the action is the exercise, the books are like the food. So to me it's like it's just as essential, but it's like it's part it's part of the whole package though. Like you need both
yeah,
to me.
yeah, like books are like vegetables. Like
Mm,
they're I mean they have some that are fairly tasty, but they're not as tasty as the other foods that you might think of. But it's good for you,
yeah.
right? You're getting your nutrients that you need, and it's pretty essential, I think, um to read. But no, like I like what you said. Spending time with a book definitely gives you more depth than watching 100 YouTube videos. And I think that right there, um it 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 requires that you give a lot of intentionality to the videos you watch, and you give a lot of intentionality when you're reading a book, to not just skim the pages and forget. Maybe you're making notes, maybe you're stopping after a chapter to reflect on what you've read, and
Mm,
implement the practices. So I think with any type of consumption, whether it be video, whether it be audio, whether it be reading, that you approach it with an intention to apply it to your life and not just consume it for the sake of consuming it. And I'm guilty of that. Like I used to do that a lot, especially with video. I would binge watch YouTube videos. Obviously social media is way too easy to do that. Um, so recently I've started to be more intentional with my consumption. And I still have my time of, mindless consumption here and there, but it's very, very, very reduced more than it's reduced far more than I have before. I do approach my media with intention because now that I have a purpose and now that I'm directing where my time is going more intentionally, it's
Mm,
it's like I don't have time to consume, mindless media as much as I used to.
definitely. Yeah, I think yeah, in general, a lot of self-improvement to me comes back to that idea of intentionality. It's all trying to do things with a purpose. It's switching from the automatic to the manual. Like once you get into that manual mode, you can control a lot more of like how you spend your time, where your focus is, and as a result, you can affect your results a lot more purposefully as well. Whereas if you're just sort of on autopilot, you're just cruising along, you just sort of end up somewhere, and maybe that'll be good, maybe not. You don't
Right.
know. Whereas if you're manually driving the car, you can steer yourself in the right direction. Like even when you go off course, you still got the ability to then steer back the right way. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, given this is about to time out, did we want to stitch this with another bit to finish off the other dot points?
Yeah, let's maybe touch on one more topic and then we'll close it out.
Sure. Well, okay. How about ideal life? What's your ideal life?
It's crazy because I've had this conversation with my wife, and obviously there's things that I would rather have that would be nice to have. Like right now we're working on saving up for a home, because we own property here in my state. So we have an acre of land. So we essentially want to build that in the next 5 years. So um, my ideal life would look like, being able to have that set up, um, you know, taking off, maybe working like 4 to 6 hours a week, spending a lot of time with my kids, teaching them things, taking them to places where they can enjoy and really experience things. And then for me, like I think that's something that I would add on top of what I'm already doing. Because I think right now, like I like to frame my life as a place from a place of gratitude, because where I'm at right now, I know that a lot of people don't have that. I know a lot of people don't
Hmm.
have the luxuries that I might have or that they could see as luxuries, because us being able to do this right here, like this is a luxury for me. I think this is awesome that we're able to share this type of thing, with the technology that we have. And you know like we've been through some stuff, but we're able to share that perspective. um
Yeah.
but anyways, I tell my wife that I'm grateful for where we're at, and even if we did do this for the rest of our lives, I would be okay with that. Not that I'm not going to try to improve my life, right? Because that's the whole gist of self-improvement. It's a never ending journey, and you kind of want to push the limits to see what you're capable of. So in addition to what I'm doing now, I just like to have a good place to call home, and just the freedom to go wherever I want, whenever I want, with my family. So how about yourself, man?
Definitely. I think that, yeah, that idea of freedom resonates a lot for me in terms of location freedom in particular. Um, So I haven't actually mentioned this on my channel yet, so this is a fucking exclusive. But so I'm moving, well, for 6 months I'll be moving to France this year. It's absolutely my favorite place I've ever been. I really love the atmosphere over there. And I think my like long-term vision would be to be able to do that on a consistent basis, to be able to spend like half my time in Australia here at home, and half my time in France in particular. But you know, it doesn't necessarily just have to be there. Maybe I go somewhere else as well. You know, just being able to spend my time not just stuck in one location. I think the perspective that a new location and a new atmosphere gives is really massive. Like every single time I ever go on holidays at all, that's the time when I really it's really strange because it's supposed to be the time when you're relaxing, right? But that's the time when I always get really fucking dialed into like I'll be reading consistently as hell. I'll be meditating, I'll be journaling, I'll be exercising, I'll do everything like perfectly whenever I'm on holiday. And I think there's something to that, to just being in a new location allows you to just reset and be super intentional, like we were talking about before. So that would be a big part of my ideal life. Another thing would just be like I would love to be doing this like full time, you know, like doing this content creation stuff. I think that's something that is really valuable to me just in terms of clarifying ideas in my own head, but also just getting the opportunity to share like my experience and what I've learned with other people and try to, you know, shorten the learning curve for others so that they can, you know, achieve whatever I achieve, you know, hopefully in a shorter amount of time. And yeah, enabling them to avoid the pitfalls that I've fallen into and avoid the missteps perhaps. Because yeah, certainly that's something that I think I've managed to do relatively successfully is just look at other people's journeys and use them as a as sort of like a warning to like, okay, do this, don't do that, you know. um and yeah,
Completely
I think
agree.
that's really valuable to be able to do that. And yeah, I just love ideas. I love philosophy, and I love just thinking about the big picture and that sort of a thing, you know.
Yeah, the potential and
Yeah,
possibilities.
yeah, exactly. And we're back. So yeah, just to wrap up the ideal life one, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I agree with you said. Yeah, like doing this full time would be pretty awesome. Um, and it's I think it just feel more liberating to, and I'm sure most people feel this way, is that you really take life into your own hands. Like
Mm,
you're not a you're not subject to anyone's call at all. You kind of take things on your own terms, and you're able to, make the choices that you want, and kind of share that example. Like I think that's what ends up happening, is that the people that get to the point in life where they want to, they end up sharing it, because like, you can have all the spoils in the world, but like what good is it to just kind of hog it all yourself? You want to share it, and you want to make it available to other people, since it's fulfilling in its own right. You want to kind of share the wealth, if you will.
100%. Yeah, it's so it's so gratifying knowing that you've helped someone too. Like
Mm.
it really it 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 makes you feel very like it's a great sense of accomplishment when you see someone's progressed specifically because you've helped them. Like I remember I taught guitar for a while, and yeah, just seeing like this dude who was in his 50s go from like not even being able to play anything to being sort of able to play a couple songs. It's like it's just a really cool experience to see that. And similarly, like I'm sure you have the same thing where you look at the comments and people are like, "Oh, this is really helpful," thanks for the video or whatever. And you just like it always feels good to see that stuff, and that really it can help you stay on track as well because then you're like, "Well, I've got a responsibility to these people to keep on track and keep being able to help them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It is a really good feeling, and being a fitness coach in the past, it's a great feeling to know that someone, you know, changed their perspective, lost some weight, built some muscle, um, got rid of their health problems. Like that's crazy. Like that blows my
Mm,
mind to know that people are, um, they're looking up to you to help change their life, at a point where they couldn't see the light to begin with. And something that you said or something that you did, the example that you show is impactful to that person. And that that's one of those feelings that you can't really explain. It's something like a euphoria, but it's more of like a deep, peaceful feeling,
yeah,
if I had to describe it. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, you're right, man. It's crazy how much impact that this type of work can have, and you know, just being real with people and helping, just lending a hand. It goes a long way.
yeah. And even yeah, it's just nuts. Like you can because at least the way I see it, like you sort of almost multiply your impact on the world by teaching others too. Like you not only do whatever positives you're doing in your life to better the world, you then also inspire other people to better the world, and then they might inspire other people, and then it just, you
The
know,
ripple
it
effect.
it cascades from there. Like
Hmm.
it's and that's really cool to be able to try to play some part in in the betterment of the world, and particularly with like our sort of content, just being able to get people to a point of higher personal power to where they can, realistically make significant changes to their communities or to their countries even. It's really inspiring, I guess, to think about that sort of an impact.
Yeah, yeah, and that's crazy that you brought that up because I recently saw, um it might have been a tweet. I don't remember. There's so much information out there. But I remember that somebody was saying that, it's not just about like the followers that you're influencing, like let's say on social media. Um, it's the followers, and then on, because let's
Mm,
say, you say something very impactful, that person really feels it and it causes them to change. And then that person shares it with their following or their family or their close-knit circle, and like you said, it's a cascade effect that you know you might not be able to change the world in human nature, but you can change one person's life, and that'll change many more people that you will never know about,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
kind of the magic in self-improvement, and then being someone who's like an advocate for change first within yourself, and then spreading that to others. Because I saw another post that said that, you have to be intentionally selfish. Selfish in a way that you're not trying to be like a narcissist or anything, or you're not trying to step on people to get ahead in life, but you're being selfish in a sense that you're taking care of yourself first. Because if you have not, like, you have to build yourself up first in order to have something to give, you have
yeah,
to be at a point where you have enough to share. It's like the hierarchy of needs. Like you have to have your basic needs met, and then you have to, transcend that. And then, once you're on a path to actualization, you can help other people actualize that are one, two, even a few more steps behind you. And
Mm,
that's the impact you have with self-improvement. That's why I'm so like, and I'm sure you are too, like, we're really passionate about this stuff because it's meaningful. It has a lot of meaning beyond, you know, the shit that we use to escape and not deal with the problems that we have. Self-improvement is strictly problem solving. We're
yeah,
solving our own problems so that we can, live better lives. And I think that's important, man. I think it's super important, especially with a world right now that's just being, attention's being just sucked into the void right now. So,
definitely. Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess we should probably move on to the next dot point we've got. So, dealing with pressure is one that you had. What was, I don't know, what was the idea? What was the topic you wanted to discuss with that one?
um, so yeah, so just like, we're talking a lot about self-improvement and all the positive things that come from it, but there's times where we deal with things that are unexpected. We deal with confrontation and we deal with um, situations that are very hard to handle emotionally, psychologically. Um,
Mm,
I don't want to get too, deep or crazy into it, but I guess when things happen and, let's say they're not going your way, you start to feel the frustration welling up, um, you know, maybe you don't know how to deal with it in the moment or um like how do you cope with that? Like do you realize after the fact that you're feeling this way, or is it something that you catch right away, or um maybe a few things that you've done to kind of help, level set your mind in those situations?
yeah. I mean, I think for me, I've always been someone who I operate the best under pressure.
Hmm.
And I think it comes from like all of my hobbies through the years have all been very based on this is the moment, don't fuck it up. Like as a kid, I was very into video games, in particular Halo,
Hmm.
and I got really fucking good at it. And I played in like competitions and stuff. And, it's like a lot of the time, it's like if you lose this game, you're out of the whole thing. So you've got that real intense pressure to perform at a high level. And so because of that, I sort of got desensitized to it almost. And then on top of that, I've been a musician. I've played guitar since I was 7, um, and pretty much since very early on, maybe like a year in, I was like performing. I as a kid I used to busk down on the street at Christmas time. Um, and yeah, that's like a pretty high pressure situation because like if you screw up, that's a problem, And then even now, like I play in a band and stuff, and yeah, it's like that. You're you're just constantly under the pressure, but because it's so much pressure to like not make a single mistake, particularly like because I play some pretty technical heavy metal stuff, right? So it's like if you make a mistake, everyone in there is probably a musician, so they're going to notice.
Yeah.
And so by having such an intense pressure for me, that's when I'm like in the zone. That's when I'm like most focused and almost the pressure doesn't matter. Like it melts away just because it should be so intense, but because you're just in the moment and you're just focused, that's when I achieve that flow state. Um, yeah, that's at least me. Like I look for ways to put myself under pressure specifically because I know that's when I'm gonna perform the best.
But yeah, that's pretty cool actually, how how you kind of adapted to that over the years. But has there ever been like a time where, it that the pressure's kind of been too much? Has it ever been, a time where you have to just kind of, I don't know, like breathe, like do deep breathing or something, or kind of just level set your head so that you can come back to like a baseline?
There has for sure. Yeah, I think particularly particularly one for me that I can recall that was really stressful was my first like proper relationship, because obviously you really big that up in your head and you make it feel like the most important thing in the world, and like realistically whatever, it doesn't really matter. But I remember at the time that was super stressful, when the arguments arise or whatever, and there's some disagreement. For me that was particularly stressful because it wasn't entirely under my control, I guess. Like there's only so much I can do. And I guess I don't want to get too much into it just for the sake of her privacy and
For
whatnot. But
sure.
like it was certainly tough to deal with her way of dealing with pressure compared to mine.
Mm.
And obviously you learn a lot from that. Um, but yeah, it's like what got me through that though was, yeah, as you say, just sort of stopping to breathe and like refocus my mind, because like you can get stuck on a lot of random bullshit that doesn't really matter, and it's like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Like let's just stop. Like what's this really about, sort of a thing. Or what yeah, looking at the root cause rather than the surface level, you know, issue that it seems to be. Like what's actually going on here? And obviously eventually, it gets too much, and things end and whatever, and you end up in different places. But it's I think by refocusing yourself like that and just sort of taking a second to stop and think and become more intentional, like we were talking about earlier, that's where you can develop that resilience to the pressure. Um, yeah, I think that's yeah.
Yeah, right on, man. Yeah, and I didn't mean to prod into anything personal, but definitely like I
No, no,
think
no.
that's
Yeah.
that's an important factor to kind of address because I think, sometimes people have a hard time dealing with, you know, built up emotions or, you know, people get triggered by things happening in the world, and that's another topic. But
Mm,
um, for me personally, I would say that um, I've honestly been someone that's always avoided confrontation if I could. But like I told you my story about working in sales, I sometimes purposefully throw myself in the fire to kind of see what happens and to give myself an urgency to perform. And much like yourself, I do reluctantly perform well under pressure as well. Um, when I'm thrown in without my consent per se, I tend to adapt to the situation.
mm,
So, and as far as emotions go and kind of heated feelings, I think I've always had naturally kind of well, I'll go back a little bit. I've had a similar situation as you, and being younger, I didn't know how to handle that, right? I didn't know what to do. So like any kid, I would, kind of just throw a fit and just kind of feel like crap afterwards. And you know, at the time, I talked to my dad about it just because it's like, well, that was probably the best person to talk to, dealing with that type of situation. But over the years, as I kind of developed and got over that, um, I've always kind of had like at that point like a more of a stoic personality, stoic mindset. Like
mm,
I, you know, I'll notice the feelings that are coming up, and then I'll see them from a very logical lens. Because when the emotions come up, I bring logic into it to kind of counterbalance it, if that makes sense. Because
definitely.
when you're feeling heated, you don't want to feel the fire. You kind of want to simmer it out with something neutral, which is, in my perspective, logic. Like, well, what's the situation here? should I be feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way? Like you kind of ask
Mm,
yourself like a very quick series of questions to kind of level set your mind and allow you to look at the situation objectively and then make decisions from there. And at that point, the heated emotions can start to taper off. And I think a lot of people can handle situations more in that manner, but I think everyone's different. You know what I mean? Like we talked about before too. Like
definitely.
there's some people that are more inclined towards their emotions. There's more people like myself who are see things objectively and kind of get over things quickly. Um, but yeah, I think we all have to kind of, find that balance of what works for us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's all in that balance, that personal balance sort of a thing. Um, well, yeah, I guess to touch on our final bullet point here, and this is one I'm particularly interested to get into. Uh, what's your perspective on spirituality? What's your sort of outlook on that?
Yeah. So we can go kind of high level and then, we can dive into the details if we see
Yep.
fit. So first of all, spirituality to me is not religion. Let's just get that out there. Like religion and spirituality, I think have different contexts. Like they could fall under the same umbrella, but I think spirituality to me means kind of the purpose you derive in life that kind of goes beyond yourself, that goes beyond the self, right? And that could mean like your connection with other people. That could mean your like I said, your purpose in life. And it's funny because we touched upon a lot of these things, but in more concrete ways. And I think spirituality can be both concrete and it can be abstract. It can be abstract in a way that you see it as purely philosophical, but it can be concrete in a way that you view it as something highly practical, such as awareness and meditation and the implications that it has on your daily life. But um, there's I think there's many ways you can slice it, right? Like spirituality has to do with, maybe the belief system that you kind of uh, identify with at the time. Um, I know for some people they kind of stick to the same type of beliefs, but I think for me it's largely changed as I've gained new perspectives and experiences through my personal experiences. Um, but yeah, I mean, did you want to riff off of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm quite atypical on this. I'm very, actually, hang on, I'll grab something real quick. So for me, I take a big inspiration. I'm rereading it at the moment from this book here, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, which essentially sets out the absurdist philosophy, which is it's sort of a branch of the existentialist school of thought. And essentially, for me, what what that brings for me is that, I mean, one of the inherent points made is a lack of any inherent meaning in life, right? So essentially his argument is that there is no, what, as humans we're rational and we sort of want to rationalize the universe, and we naturally ask these questions of existence and of meaning for ourselves. But then when we ask those questions out to the universe, like, I don't know, there's nothing coming back, like you can sort of find some meanings within yourself, but are they real, or are they just rationalizations of what you sort of want the world to be? And obviously, they can serve some function, right? Like people find a lot of comfort in things like religion and in their personal definitions of spirituality. But in the context of looking for a reason to exist, I find that that isn't necessary. Like, for me, I take great comfort in just the lack of any meaning, and I don't try to prescribe any particular meaning to my life or to anything. Like, I have objectives and I have things that I want to achieve, but I think to give that some sort of grander meaning to me just isn't necessary or even particularly fulfilling. Like I just find that it's completely it's not something that particularly matters to me. And obviously spirituality comes in different forms, and that's not necessarily what it is for everyone. But for me, it's like it's almost like a question that I don't find particularly important for myself, I guess. Like I think it's an interesting question to ask just like as a thing to think about. It's interesting, but I'm not sure if it's something which directly impacts me, I guess is what I'm trying to say, you know? Like but that's a very personal thing for me at least, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think spirituality, like you said, is it is very personal. And like also you touched on, you don't think it's required to kind of go about your day to day. And I certainly agree with that. I certainly agree that you don't have to be actively thinking or tied to a higher purpose or higher power, if you will, in order to live out your life and carry out your daily duties.
Mm.
Like it's not necessarily, I think spirituality can be more abstract than it is concrete, just because, like you said, there's not an inherent meaning in things. It's the things we kind of give meaning to things at a personal level. And whether there's like a universal truth or not, that's super gray. You can't really define
Yeah.
that because there's nothing. It's hard to put into words that the experiences other people have versus others at an abstract level. I don't know
Mm.
how else to kind of to put it, but you know, there's people that have certain beliefs and that they think things happen because of something beyond their control or beyond their understanding. And I
Yeah.
think that is important to kind of, you know, touch upon because, unlike physics, we know that things happen because of physics, because we can measure that. Spirituality, you can't necessarily measure. And that's the problem I think many people have with it, is that it's not concrete enough. It's not you can't necessarily fit it into a box that everyone can look at and say, oh yeah, that's spirituality, you know?
Yeah. It's very broad. It's not
Mhm.
any one thing. It's sort of it almost lacks definition. Like it just sort
Yeah,
of is in the eye of the beholder. Like it's completely it's like the most abstract thing possible. Like you just
yeah,
cannot put it into any particular box. And yeah, which I think makes it very difficult because it's like you're saying, like you can't say, for instance, people who have some sort of like religious experience, you know, and they feel like, well, I've felt the presence of God, whoever that God might be. Like you can't disprove that, but the problem is they can't prove the they can't prove it either, you know? Like it's just a zero sum battle because like you can't prove that they didn't have a religious experience, but at the same time they can't prove that their experience was, you know, religious or that it was spiritual or any of that any more than you can prove that, like, I don't know, that you can't prove that you're happy, you can't prove that you're sad. It's just something that sort of is in your
yeah,
mind. Like it's completely abstract. Like it's not anything, but it is something to you.
yeah. And I think it comes more from like certain qualities that we observe, right? But everything that we experience is not necessarily observable.
Mm,
Like we can come to the lot like the thought process of like I just said it, but like where do thoughts come from? Like where do they manifest? Like all this that we're experiencing right now, like where how is that being derived? Like, there's been some talks, I don't know if you know about Sam Harris and other guys from the neuro the neuroscience space that that they're saying
mm,
that consciousness doesn't derive from the brain. It's kind of
yeah,
just inherent to the experience. But I don't know, it gets pretty, gnarly in the sense that like it's a big like mind fuck that
yeah,
you don't really know where to base your, I guess, their assumptions from, but the evidence it's very sparse in that there's no way you can like really put a label on it yet. Um,
mm,
but the only thing that you can really go off is what the literature says in conjunction with your direct experience.
yeah,
And that's why spirituality, I think, is highly individual at this
mm,
point in time. There's no like universal truth. There's no like inherent meaning for all humans and all, reality in the 3D, the three-dimensional world that we live in, or four-dimensional, however you want to look at it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know,
I
there's so
mean,
many rabbit holes.
yeah, I think the only, like, to me at least, the only universal truth in that regard in this space is essentially like you should try the best you can to live according to your personal virtues. Like, whatever they may be, however abhorrent they might be to someone else, like, there's nothing else you can do without being like, I think the only way to fail almost in this space is to be a hypocrite. Like, follow your as long as you are virtuous in your own mind, I think that's the main important thing.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's funny that you bring that up, and I I agree to a degree. And then there's people that say that, well, some people's idea of doing virtuous things is even people that are, you know, psychotic, people that are psychopaths.
Yeah,
They believe that they're doing the right thing by, you know, doing things that other people would find very unfavorable. Um,
definitely.
but that's kind of another rabbit hole that you can spin off of because, that all goes back to like personal choice and what is, what truly is ethics, like something that, it's something that we all kind of generally ascribe that something is good and something is bad, but there's also that gray area that, you know, that we don't know how to label.
Yeah, it's completely it's so tricky, yeah, because yeah, like you're saying, like when someone's ethics go to the point of enacting violence, say, on other people, it's tricky to sort of justify that morally, like to sort of accept them doing that, like. But I suppose the counter argument to that would be that, like, they can do that, but then it's also according to someone else's ethics to try to counteract them and to try to, to try to stop them from doing that. And I mean, I guess, to me at least, like, 100% things like, terrorism and violence and stuff, like, in according to my ethics, would, never be a good solution. Like, I don't think violence in any form is a particularly good solution to anything. But at the same time, if someone feels like it is, then it's almost it's on the onus of the individual to then debate that point and try to convince, why potentially they could be wrong, or why, and I guess for them it would be convincing why they're right. It's sort of, it's it's in the debate of it, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really slippery, man. And
Mm,
that's it's hard to like we've been saying, it's really hard to put it into a definable concept that we can fully understand because um it, there's just so many turns and there's no answer to it
yeah.
like with science,
There's
usually
no good
there's
answer, at least.
some type of conclusion. But it's crazy, man, because like I used to talk more about this like in college when I was like exploring spirituality and consciousness and you know as it relates to like physics and even quantum mechanics and all that. It's it's really a very big like I said mind fuck, but this is something I've wanted to look at into a little more because it's just interesting, right? Like
It is, yeah.
if we have the minds to be able to um think about and talk about this stuff, like it's worth exploring, I think, in our lifetime. um but yeah, man, I don't have too much of a strong opinion on any of this because it's like we said, it's a lot of gray area. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tricky to, yeah, it's tricky to like argue particularly against a, it's tricky to well, it's impossible to disprove anyone's ethics just because it is so, like we keep saying, it's impossible because it's so personal, and it's so inbuilt in the particular, you know place that we were brought up in, the people we're brought up around. Like, it's so based on a lifetime of experiences that it's impossible to completely convince someone of something, at least once they've reached adulthood in particular. Like, even as a child, I'm sure it's tricky to convince a child of a particular set of ethics if they go contrary to what they've learnt so far. But like, it's even more impossible a task to convince like an adult, because they've had, at least
so much
18 years
conditioning.
minimum of thinking a certain way. Like,
Yeah,
it's tricky.
yeah, man. And yeah, like I said, I think it's hard to beat conditioning and psychology and the way
Mm,
our minds are wired. I think the way they're wired kind of limits, in a sense, the way we think. Like I think we're almost limited by our brain capacity, and it
definitely.
only makes sense to say that, um but like you mentioned before, maybe these spiritual experiences that people have, near death experiences, or using certain psychedelics could give you a new perspective that wasn't there before, that somehow relates to all this stuff. But that's
Mm.
maybe something to explore at another time.
Yeah, it's that question of what is reality even, like,
Yeah,
which obviously is a massive rabbit hole to get into. But
what
yeah.
is?
What is? Yeah, that's the question. But
It gets
anyway, with
smaller and smaller.
yeah, yeah, you just constantly get more and more granular.
Hmm.
But anyway, we should probably wrap this up. Uh, I don't know, any closing thoughts, anything you want to add to close this off?
Yeah, no, this was a great talk. I definitely got a lot out of it from your perspective. I think it's good to trade perspective, respectfully with people, even if you disagree with someone, you should always like question, like, well, why do I disagree with it? Like, what perspective
Mm,
are they coming from that I might not know about? And I think if we come from that point of view, um, I think we'd be more um less violence and disagreements in the world and wars. But that's a lot of progress to be made there. That's a big call to action. um
yeah.
But yeah, yeah. So I was just gonna say that, for anyone watching, hope you enjoyed this talk. If you've made it this far, comment below what you guys would like to see from me and from Ethan. And what was your favorite part about this talk. Um, but yeah, you can find us on YouTube, and our other socials are linked in the description, most likely. So
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's been a great discussion. Really, really happy with how it's turned out. It's been, yeah, really interesting hearing your perspective, and yeah, definitely we'll have to do it again sometime.
sounds good,
Yeah,
man. All right, appreciate
cool.
it.
Righto. Catch up.